Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the public speaking support. I have to think about it. I still don't know my group name. It's the second interview that we're having for the group, and we're growing steadily. We are at a few hundred members, and we're growing by about 5 to 10 members a day. So I think we'll be big after a while. Public speaking, they say, is the bigger fear than death, which I don't believe. Because if somebody kept put a gun at my head, I would like, okay, I'll do that keynote. Though I would have probably, what's a better alternative of, I would have peed myself. Let's go with that one. I used to have a phobia of public speaking, but yeah, today we will speak with Andrew Winig. He's a elevator pitch coach and presentation skills coach. And we'll talk about fear of public speaking and presentation skills and all that. So Andrew, welcome to the call.
Thanks a lot, EG. Great to be here.
Thank you for accepting my invite.
Absolutely.
And yeah, make sure to check out his website. Tell us the address.
It's improvandy.com.
Improvandy.com. Yeah, and I was watching before this call, I was watching the video on your homepage. It's filled with nuggets about elevator pitch and about all kind of cool stuff. So make sure to check it out, and we will put the URL under the video as well. All right, so let's dive into it. Let's not waste. I don't like it when they have fluff and all that, talking about childhood and all kind of stuff. So let's just dive into it. So for decades, I looked up at speakers and I'm like, wow. I mean, they were like right up there with the Pope or something. Like, I could never do that. I mean, I used to have like horrendous phobia of public speaking.
Yeah.
I thought it was something that I could never, ever do.
Yeah.
So one question that always was in the back of my mind, how does one become a public speaker? How did you get into presenting?
So I've always loved theater. I've always loved being on stage, and starting in middle school, I was in shows, musicals, everything. So I've always loved being on stage. And for years, I said that I lived two lives, because I was programming computers during the day and then doing theater at night. And I finally got to the point that I wanted to integrate my two selves. And I started doing presentations. And it's interesting because even with all the stage experience I had, I still got really nervous for the presentations.
Very different.
It's very different. Every time you change it, it's very different. And so, I mean, the answer is the way you become a public speaker is by public speaking. I mean, that there's really no way around that, and it's terrifying. And I mean, I worked with actors who would get sick, who would get physically ill before they went on stage. And I kept wanting to say to them, you could find a different hobby. Like, we were doing community theater stuff. You could find a different hobby, but they loved being on stage. And so I mean, the first tip I can share is that the nervousness you feel, the anxiety, is actually the same bodily sensation as excitement. And as I have spoken over the years, I recognize that and especially now, like I'm doing something in a couple of weeks that I'm actually nervous about. I don't usually get nervous for things, but I'm nervous about it. And that's a good sign. It means that it's something that I'm doing that I care about. It means that I want to do my best, and I haven't really done it before. And so I'm trying something new. And so I think that reframing it that way, I get anxious before speaking. I get excited before speaking, right? I'm excited to do this. And it's the same bodily feelings, that it's the same thing. Like you can do it either way. And so I like to kind of think of it as excitement. And as you do more speaking, you think of it more as excitement, if you like speaking.
I would have never, ever given a speech in my life, but I was committed to becoming the best back then life coach or results coach, as I called myself.
Yep.
And I heard it over and over again that public speaking is the number one way to get your message out there and to get clients. And I'm like, oh. And then this young lady, one of my coaches, said, will you do what's comfortable, or are you willing to do what's necessary? Something like that.
Right.
I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I'll do whatever it takes. I think that's what. So will you do?
And it's interesting. I had a client the other day who she's published a book and she wants to sell the book. I said, great. So you're doing a speaking tour? Oh, no, I don't want to do a speaking tour. I said, well, do you want to do workshops or web? Oh, no, I don't want to do any of that. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, we can talk about what you want to do, but if you want to get the message out, Right. And it's the kind of thing, it goes the other way. She thinks she's going to sell a lot of books and that'll get her message out. But in fact, you need to get your message out and then that sells the books.
Correct.
And so it's an interesting, it'll be interesting to see what she decides to do to promote the book, because yes, I mean, you do need to do something promotional. You can write newsletters or record videos. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do, but you do need to do something to get your message out. And as you say, I mean, if your goal is to get the message out, then yes, speaking is a good way of doing that.
And so I started exploring to get over my fear of public speaking. And what I heard over and over again, that you should join Toastmasters. You should join Toastmasters. And I was thinking, why should I join a society that practices toasting, like Toastmaster? I thought they practice toasting at weddings and events. And I'm like, that's dumb. And then I told the story to somebody and the person said, oh, I thought that was an organization where they practice the perfect breakfast toast. And I'm like, wow, never thought about it that way. But yeah, I joined Toastmasters. I took all the college classes. I hired a public speaking coach. When I have ADD. When I do something, I do it. I just like go for it, like full force. And it's a cool law of attraction story for those who believe in the law of attraction. I do not believe it as it's put out there, but the law of attraction is real. If you take action in a certain direction, things start happening. And so I told my friends that I'm becoming a public speaker also, and I'm walking in the street with my friend, and two ladies come towards us and, hey, let me introduce you to E.G. Sebastian. He's a coach and a public speaker. I think she introduced me as a motivational speaker, which I never call myself that. Nevertheless, probably it's happening to you too. I was introduced at least 20 or 30 times as a motivational speaker. Sure. Never did I say those words, doesn't say it anywhere on any of my websites. And so she introduces me to these ladies, and one of them says, well, we have the Healthy Families of America's annual national conference. Would you like to be our keynote speaker? I'm like, oh, I would be honored. And my knees started shaking and I got this stomach cramp and I almost passed out there in the street. But that's how it started for me. And so when you put out something to the world and you start taking steps toward the direction, it seems like the universe starts giving you chances. And interestingly enough, from that keynote, I got invited to present for the Housing Authority and for DHEC. And from then it just kept on fanning out. I did not know that you can get paid as a speaker, actually. I just wanted to do free speeches to get clients, coaching clients.
Gotcha.
And then for the past 20 years, I've been speaking, paid speaking and coaching because I love to coach.
Yeah.
So, sorry, ADD kicks in and I get on a tangent.
No, that's good.
Hopefully it's a good story.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick out of all of your presentations, what would you say is one of your most favorite? Which one are you most proud of?
Well, it actually goes back a ways. Like I love the work that I do now and the workshops and the interactivity and the engagement that I've done. I really enjoy. But when I think about my favorite talk, probably is I was an engineer. I programmed computers for years, and they had us. There were about 12 team leads. This was a pretty big programming project, and they asked us to do a talk about the design of the system. And E.G., I just couldn't bring myself to do another block diagram presentation. And so I had an idea, but it really made me nervous. But I gathered the engineers together, right? These are computer people. I gathered the engineers together and I said, hey, everyone, I said, I don't feel like doing a block diagram thing for this. I said, why don't we act it out? And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, we're doing phone calls, like voicemail systems. And so there's a call flow and everything. I said, well, we'll have somebody play the call and they come in and they just interact with all the different, and they were like, yeah, let's do that. And I was stunned because, I mean, again, these were people you would think wouldn't want to be on stage. But we did it. We did, we put it together, and each lead had their kind of section of things. We kind of got playing the phone call, came in and ping pong between the things. And one of my favorite pieces of it was that when a phone call comes in the handshaking internally, it's called an in-seizure. Like that's just the name of the protocol that happens when the call comes in. And so our guys playing the phone call comes in and performed an in-seizure. It was so creative. So we did this presentation for our bosses, and then for their bosses, and then for their bosses, and then for the executive committee, and then we just went right up the chain given this presentation. And finally we said, look, everyone, we kind of need to program. We need to code this thing. We're happy presenting. But it was so out of the box. I hate to say out of the box, but it was such a creative approach to this thing, and it got everyone involved, right? Instead of me standing there droning on about another block diagram, we got everybody involved. And that's really what I like to help people with in presentations, is thinking of a way to get people engaged, right? How do you kind of, and not just the audience, right? We got the audience was engaged because all the team leads were engaged. And again, it's all these engineers up there acting out our system. And people had so much better sense of what was going on than if I'd thrown up a block diagram, right? Everyone understood the system so much better, including us, right? I mean, working on this kind of helped us see the whole thing. And so I really love that presentation. Like it was such a, I was so nervous about it, because asking engineers to get up on stage, as you say, I mean, everyone's asking engineers to get up on stage with me and do this thing, but they were game, and people like doing this kind of stuff. Right? If I'd asked them to do a block presentation, they wouldn't have done it. But acting it out, they were game, and it was great. It was really fun. Yeah.
We tend to, especially in the beginning, most of us, we are terrified. Oh, by the way, Aretha Franklin, supposedly she threw up before every performance. I mean, many of us who get up on stages, we deal with fear of speaking or performing.
Have you heard why that is? Why we're afraid of that?
Well, why? No. And
so
I think I heard a few things. I heard a few things, and I disagree with some of them, because one of them was that because you are unprepared. That's not true.
Oh, well,
at the beginning, I prepared, and I was still horrified.
We'll talk about that in a minute, of prepared. There's actually a real biological reason that you're scared when you're in front of people. And it goes back to the early days of being a hunter-gatherer. And imagine you're on the steppe in the savannah, and you get separated from your group, and you come face to face with a lion, right? You're now in serious danger. And think about it. You're isolated. You're alone with this thing that's looking at you, right? And there's really no way to get away. And that same thing comes true when you're speaking. Think about it. The lights are on you. There's an audience out there looking at you. You're alone on the stage. And so this fight or flight really kicks in. And the nervousness people are feeling is this fight or flight. That's where it comes from. And so when you get on stage, obviously the audience is not going to eat you, right? Like you can feel safe that it's not actually a life or death situation. But biologically, it feels like a life or death situation. Mm-hmm. And so I teach people that, because that can help, right? Knowing that it's normal to be nervous when you're in front of a group, right? When you're alone in front of a group and they're all looking at you, that kicks in all our fight or flight mechanisms because of because of the hunter-gatherer days. And so it's a totally natural thing. That's why everyone experiences it. And again, knowing that and knowing that there's that fear and excitement are kind of the same. They manifest the same way in your body. That can help. Like, oh, this is just me. Oh, this is just me thinking that I'm facing a lion, right? And then you can go on with your talk.
They say that knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
I say that's bullshit. Knowledge is potential of power.
Yes.
Knowledge is nothing.
Right.
Many of us know that we shouldn't eat this, that, and we still eat it, and we get heart attack at age 40.
Exactly.
But I was told many times that I moved up to the mountains in North Carolina. I'm a little bit outside of Asheville. Absolutely love it. I was horrified of black bears. I'm like, what did I do? I exchanged sharks for black bears. And I was told that they will not hurt you. They will run away unless they have cubs. I'm like, unless. How do I know they have cubs or not? Right? But I'm an avid mountain biker, avid hiker. And when I met my first black bear, I thought I will pass out or something. Instead, I reached to my pocket. I took out the cell phone and I started recording. And I'm like, oh, I just saw my first black bear. And she heard me, even though I was whispering, she heard me. We locked eyes and she ran away. I've never been afraid of a bear ever again. And same with public speaking. Up till the moment you do it, it can be terrifying.
Right.
And you have all of these, like for me, who am I to talk to this group of managers managing multi-billion-dollar companies? I never managed a multi-billion-dollar company. Like, who am I to tell them to stand up and get into groups, right? And do role playing and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But once you do it, once you suck it up and you do it, it's like, wow.
And you might be surprised. Well, you might be surprised how those people who run multi-billion-dollar multinational companies, they'd be afraid to do what you're doing.
They'd be afraid, but the number one lesson I learned right after my first workshop, I do mostly workshops. So before keynotes, I still cannot sleep. And I'm terrified, not terrified, but yeah, I'm anxious. Before workshops, zero anxiety. I have a routine. I go have Mexican dinner. I talk to the waiters. It's my Spanish.
A Mexican before a speech? Oh my goodness. That's
Conservative Mexican, not tacos and that kind of stuff. For me, it's chicken and rice. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And then I watch HBO or something, and then I sleep like a baby. I drink like 2 or 3 beers maybe.
Yeah.
And I sleep like a baby. And in the morning, I can't wait to get in front of the crowd. And I do full day and multi-day workshops usually.
Yeah.
And I completely forgot what I was saying.
Well, you were talking about doing full day workshops, and you're scared about keynotes, but not about
yeah. So the key is to do it. And once I did it, the first lesson that I learned was that these people who manage multi-million-dollar businesses, a multi-billion-dollar business, they're just people just like you and I.
Yeah.
They ask questions like, wow, so really, like, is that predictable? Like humans can be that predictable? Like when we talk about personality styles, like, wow, and then, well, I never knew that. And like simple things, and they're like wondering, and exactly like you and I.
Right.
They have insecurities and they have questions. They don't know
Amazing, right?
stuff. And it was like, wow, that was magical. I couldn't wait to do it again and again and again.
Yeah.
So yeah, the key is to just get out there and do it. And
well, and I think it's good to recognize what you like doing, right? Workshops are a little more interactive. It's a little bit less you standing on stage. And I know some people who love keynotes but hate workshops, right? And I think it's just good to kind of know where your wheelhouse is and what you enjoy doing.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the other thing, because you don't get scared of the stuff that you like doing and are good at. Like you won't be scared.
I'd rather get paid $2,500 or $1,000 and do a workshop than be the keynote speaker and get paid $15,000 or $20,000. Absolutely, I mean, any day. I don't care about the money. I care about. I love presenting. I love helping people. And I think in a workshop, I can help you way more than in a 20 or 30 minutes keynote where I'm supposed to be there and entertain you.
Yeah.
So, how, like you personally, what helped you gain confidence in presenting?
Yeah, people ask me why I'm not nervous being on stage. And what I like to tell people is that I've messed up so many different times in so many different ways in front of so many different audiences. And the thing is, a lot of times they don't know. I mean, they're not holding your script, right? They don't know anything happened. Actually, the biggest mess up. I was in a competition, a theater competition. This was years ago. And the thing about theater competitions is if you go a minute over the allotted time, if you go a second over the allotted time, you get no awards. Like you're eliminated from any awards. You have to do that for
like in Toastmaster competitions, yeah.
So there was some argument going on between our stage manager and the lighting director. And so it was this big melodrama. So we had a train coming, and so there's this big light from the back of the stage shining out into the audience. And they did not turn the light off. They didn't go to the next cue to start the final scene. And I was the one starting the final scene. And I knew that when you're an actor in this situation, you know exactly how much time you have left. We're all timing it because we know when we have to be done. So I knew I had to go out there, even though the thing was there. So I did the entire final scene backlit. And the thing was, it was a competition. So the audience was full of theater people. And what being backlit meant was I could see the horrified looks on all their faces because they knew that this was not the way it was supposed to be, right? They knew that was not it. And everyone knew that it wasn't like there was no, people were like, oh, you really screwed up. Like they knew that something had gone wrong, and that happens in live theater, and what can you do? And so over time, I've learned, and I took improvisational acting classes. Actually, that's something if anybody who wants to get better at thinking on their feet and doing that kind of stuff, the improv classes were amazing because it makes you comfortable being uncomfortable.
And cross it out. I was about to ask you that.
Yeah. Well, my company's Improv Andy because that's the training. I'm trained as an improvisational actor, and that really. I'll never forget this one thing. We were doing this character thing one night, and usually I'm the first one to jump up, like I jump up and do it. And people kept going up and doing a really good job. And I just didn't think I was going to do that good a job. So I kind of slunk further and further back into my seat. And I finally did it, and it went great, right? I mean, it's interesting how you become comfortable being uncomfortable, but you just get more comfortable in yourself and listening to people. And, you were talking about the keynote earlier that you like the interactive stuff, but the best keynote speakers are also interactive, right? I do keynotes and I engage the audience. Like it's not just me talking for half an hour.
That's what I decided a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
That I will not be scared of keynotes anymore. I will turn them into not mini workshops, but like an interactive.
Yeah, you make them interactive, and I encourage people, like you probably do this too. But I love talking to people about taking. I say that when you've got your PowerPoint outline, that's the beginning of writing your speech. A lot of people take the outline and then go try to present that, and that's why it's scary and weird, because you're not really done yet. What you want to do is take that outline and turn it into a speech. And I like to, especially for interactive speeches, for each thing you want to teach, there's a lesson you want to teach, there's a story you tell, an interactive exercise that you have people do. And I do that whether I'm running a workshop or a keynote or anything, but I develop the whole program. And when you're telling stories, it's easier to tell stories than to like read off a slide kind of thing. Like it's just that kind of gets you into it, and it's more engaging for your audience. And so I really like doing that kind of work with people, is to get things more interactive and to have more engagement with the audience.
So improv helped you, and what would you say about storytelling workshops these days? Those are, it's like a buzz.
Storytelling is crucial. I use it in my writing, like my weekly newsletter is all about storytelling. So I do a lot of storytelling. Improv also works pretty hard on the storytelling. Mm-hmm. And the thing about improv is that if you think about doing a scene, right, everyone's playing a character and you've got all the people on stage and you're telling a story, but you can't talk to each other about what the story is about. Your only character is giving your next line as the character. So you kind of have to understand the arc of it. You have to understand storytelling in order to do improv. So there's a lot of storytelling behind that, but it gets worse than that, because it's not just the actors on stage. You've also got the lighting people and the music people. And if you finish your scene and the lighting person doesn't put the lights down, you're still doing your scene. So it's important that the whole team, like it's important that everybody kind of be on the same page in terms of when the story starts, when the story ends. Like, sometimes the story feels like it's ending, but you got a better idea to cap it off even further. And you kind of all have to be on the same page with that. So the storytelling is a huge part of improv. Like that's what improv is. You're telling a story with each other. But again, you can't whisper to each other like, okay, now I want this character. You just have to do it and follow along with each other. And so learning how to do that makes it really, once you can do that on an improv stage, it's pretty easy to do that in front of a keynote audience, because you're the storyteller.
I don't think you can do improv from YouTube videos, but you can learn storytelling probably from YouTube videos. Maybe you can join group coaching programs. Yeah. But yeah, so these are two things you can do to improve your confidence.
Yes, I mean, I agree. You can learn storytelling by telling stories. Yes, improv by its nature is a team sport, so you can't do improv by yourself. You need other people. You need to work with other people to do improv.
And we have some of that in our area, and I was kind of hesitant, trying to decide between terrified or hesitant. I'll go with hesitant. But I think I will give it a try. I will give it I think you just flipped it to you tipped the.
So I was so scared of the improv because a friend of mine, my high school friend's college roommate's husband opened up a local improv troupe here, and she was like, "Hey, come! It's New Year's Eve. Like, come with me." So I went and saw them, and they were like, "Hey, improv classes." So I put my email address in. This was back in the 90s. I think I'd just gotten an email address or something. So I put my email address in, and they emailed me like, "Hey, we're starting improv classes." And I was like, "No way! Like, not doing that." And then 6 weeks later, like, "Hey, starting." I was like, "No way!" And I think the third time they emailed me, I was like, "All right, now it's time." And I was like, I'll just do one. Like they had 6 levels kind of thing. So I was like, I'll just do the first level. Like I loved it so much. Like, and especially with what you do, EG. I mean, for anybody who's doing this kind of work, improv, like learning the skills, being able to learn the skills that make you more comfortable on stage and more interactive with people and kind of understanding the audience better. He was talking about the guy who taught me. One of the guys who taught me was talking about how people come to improv shows occasionally and say, you must have scripted that, like you must have known where that was going. And we don't. Like the improv actors, you're making it up as you go. But when you become really good as an improv actor, you can start to feel what the audience wants and you just give it to them. And that's why it feels so natural to them, that they're kind of expecting this thing to happen, and then it happens and they're like, oh, there's no way they could have made that up. But being that in tune with your audience, again, whether you're doing workshops or keynotes or whatever you're doing, it's really helpful to have that in attunement to each other and to the audience. And that's really what improv helps with. And so, yes, I highly recommend improv. You're going to love it. You're going to love it.
So I think I'm a professional improv guy without ever going to an improv workshop.
Sure.
And it's a gift from the creator mother. Yeah. Like I've never practiced a workshop from beginning till end. I practice my opening statement and my closing statement. Everything else I make up based on the bullet points. And what I noticed from the beginning, I did not know that I'm funny. What I noticed from the beginning is that I say things and everybody's laughing and people are falling off their chairs. And I did not know that I was going there. And I started watching my videos to see what is funny, to see if I can see a pattern so I can use that. And some of it I reuse them, but most of it just comes out on the spot. And actually my wife, for the past 2.5 decades, she's been taking notes on stuff that I'm making up, like funny stuff, because one of my secret goals is to do stand-up comedy. And I'm terrified. Now that I live here in Asheville area, there are stand-up comedy clubs. But yeah, I need to go and attend a few and then stand up there.
Well, it's funny. People confuse improv with stand-up. When people hear I'm training improv, they think it's stand-up, and it's very different. And stand-up is very scripted. I mean, stand-up, you work, you go and you bomb for like a year, and then you start having stuff.
And you have to get people to laugh. At improv, you don't have to make people do anything. You just have to improvise.
Right. No, and actually with improv, the more committed you are to your character, the funnier it will. If you're trying to be funny in improv, it doesn't work. But in improv, but you're right. In stand-up, you're trying to be funny. Like that's the goal.
It's hard. That's pressure on you.
Oh yeah. No, it's stand-up is really hard work. That's really hard.
So what's the biggest mistake you see people doing when preparing or when delivering presentations?
So the biggest mistake people make, and I was working with someone on this just a couple of weeks ago. He's a really good presenter, but there were two things. He had a lot of filler words going on, like he was, it's just kind of, and you could tell it was when he kind of got off script. And so we did two things. The first is that we cleaned up his agenda, sort of thing. I have a nice process where you can make a really simple agenda for yourself in your head, and you kind of tie it together. And the thing is, the audience, like if you're reading a book, the analogy I've heard is you're reading a book. You know how many pages you have left? Like you can kind of see what's left. When you're giving a presentation, people don't have any idea where you are in the you could be talking for 2 more minutes or 200 more minutes, and nobody really knows. And so it's really nice to give people a path through it. Say, okay, I'm going to talk about this and this and this, and then kind of tell people where you are. And it feels weird as a speaker to do that because you know what you're talking about, but you have to remember that the audience doesn't. And there's something that really helps with the confidence when you're clear about your agenda as you're going through the agenda. The second thing, you talked about this earlier, and people are not prepared. Like I find that when people give presentations, they are not prepared. Because this guy I was working with, like he had never practiced a presentation. And so I said, look, and the thing I recommend when you're practicing it, record it. I mean, if you're doing something on Zoom, turn on recording. There's something, and if you're doing it in person, just turn on your phone or whatever. Like you just want to record yourself doing it. And the strangest thing is that you can practice and practice and it sounds fine, right? The instant you hit record and you start talking, right? I mean, it creates that pressure for you. And we figured out with this guy I was working with, I had him do 2 practice sessions, and then he did his live session. So I got 3 recordings from him of what he was doing. And it was interesting because the second practice was better than the live presentation. And so then we moved to him doing 1 practice session and then the presentation. And he didn't do, and it's not scripted. I mean, he's not writing a script out. But when you do a practice session, it lets you kind of iron out those kind of weird language things, right? It just gives you a chance to work on it. And I've worked with people who need to do 3 or 4 practice sessions. I've worked with some people who don't need a practice session, but I find that running the program, and even with interactive stuff, I mean, I run, you can't run the interactive stuff by yourself, but running how you get into it, running how you set people up for it, just going through that and recording it for yourself, whether you watch the recording or not. Like some people don't like watching the recording, and that's fine. Just the act of recording it helps you get better at it because, people don't practice. And I really, when people practice, and that's the thing, this guy now has he's clear about the agenda and he's practiced it a couple of times. He's so much better. Like the filler words are gone. And it's just he loves it. Like it's so much better. So those are kind of the two things. You want to be really clear about where you are in the process for your audience, and you also want to have practiced it.
I don't know if I heard this in Toastmasters or where. Said, tell them what you're gonna tell them, then tell them what you told them.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a little bit. If you do it that way, it's a little bit too obvious, right? It's actually a tactic blown sort of thing. but it is, but this process I teach is that way, right? I mean, I'm going to talk about three things. These are the three things here. Let's talk about the first thing. All right, we talked about the first thing. Let's talk about the second thing, right? It sounds really simplistic when you look at it. And I learned this years ago. I was running a camp for teenagers, and I brought this guy in to speak about this, and I sat in on this talk on public speaking, and I learned the technique, and I was thinking, man, this is really a basic technique. I was like, I can't. And then about 6 months later, I was going back over my notes, and I realized that everything I had done since then used that technique. Like, I got so much better at speaking from just using that basic, simple technique. And everything I do now has this process to it. I've been doing this for over a decade now. And it's just such a nice, it helps keep you grounded. It helps you know what you're doing. And again, and then it gives you a model for kind of practicing where you're going. And so I find it to be a really useful way to increase confidence that way.
So one thing that I learned that helped me most to eliminate, or at least reduce, my fear of public speaking for keynotes, was to have a structure, like you just said. So I will have a what do you call these?
Note card, yeah.
The note card, yeah, on the lectern.
Yep.
Not podium. The podium is the podium where you stand on it. Lots of people say.
Oh, interesting. Oh, it's funny. I don't think I knew
say
that.
Podium, yeah, on the lectern. So I have it on the lectern. And guess what I have on it? I have 3 lines on it.
Yep.
Because I learned that, especially in a 20-minute keynote or half an hour keynote, have 3 clear topics that you want to get, 3 clear points that you want to get across. And to get those across, if I tell them the 3 points, they will forget them. But I make point 1, and I tell a story that relates to that point.
Yep.
And then I will end it with the lesson learned from that story and the action call, maybe.
Yep.
And then I can glance at this and I see my second point. And from the second point, I will remember my second story. And the third point and the third story. Yep. And then I memorized my.
And then you're done.
My closing, and I do the closing, and then yay!
Yeah. Right.
I'm ready to collect my check.
Well, and that's you being prepared, right? And I mean, some people like note cards, some people don't. I know some people have you can get things that put your speech in your ear, kind of thing. I mean, there's all sorts of cool things you can do to be prepared for the speech. But and it sounds like that's the way you prepare. That's the way you get prepared for the speech, right? And I really encourage people. Like, that's the thing. I don't have when I work with people, I like to give them a way that's comfortable for them, right? Not everybody likes note cards, and I tell people, you can bring your script up on this. I mean, you don't want to stand there reading the script, but if it's helpful to you to have the script up there on the stage and you glance at it,
exactly.
And especially if you're doing interactive stuff, like people aren't looking at you during the interactive stuff, you can glance at the thing and remind yourself what's coming up next, right? I mean, it's a really, so I think that there's all these techniques that come together to help you feel prepared and in control when you're up there on stage.
In school, we had to memorize poems and dates and all kind of stuff, and you had to stand up and
recite
to the class. Recite. And I memorized maybe 1 or 2 poems my entire life. I could not memorize anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I could never become a speaker because I cannot remember a 20-minute speech, a 1 hour Tony Robbins speaking the whole day. I could never
whole weekend.
Right? So we compare ourselves to all these people and we think I could never remember all of that, right? But so PowerPoint, people think the PowerPoint is there for them. No, it's there for me.
Right. And
to increase your confidence, one of the things is that you have to keep doing it, right?
Yes.
So it used to be that I'm presenting, and just like I did earlier today, I'm like, oh crap, I completely lost my train of thought. Except I would not say that. I would just, my eyes would get big and I would stare at the ground and I'm like, fuck, I forgot what was I talking about? And I was just, and those 2-3 seconds would feel like forever. And then I would get tensed, and then I look up at the PowerPoint and they're just going with the next bullet point. Yep. I mean, just like that, like leaving it hanging. And so now if it happens in the past 10 years, if this happens, I'm like, oh crap, I lost my train of thought. And then people will just tell me, and then I move on. And you know how much nervousness or embarrassment I have? 0.
Right.
And they love it because I come across more as a human instead of this perfect person who remembers everything.
Right.
So yeah, don't be embarrassed if you lose your train of thought. Just say like, oh, what was I talking about? It's fine. They will tell you.
Yeah. And if they don't remember, then you need to improve your speech.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so again, I do, 6 to 8 hours presentations to corporate clients, so the teams. So I could not remember. I can't even remember 20. But the other thing that you
and I don't script. I mean, that's the thing. I think it's important to practice. I don't think you want to script it and memorize it.
Oh yeah, that's tough.
Then if you lose your point, then if you lose your track of where you are, then you're done.
You're screwed. Yeah, then you're screwed.
Yeah. So.
And then the other thing is, because I do very interactive workshops, I will have my opening statement. Yeah, I memorize that. And then I give them a group activity. While they do the group activity, I look at my three-ring binder and I see what's coming next. Then I present the next bit, and then I give them a group activity. Well, guess what I do while they do the group activity?
Absolutely, yeah.
I will walk around a little bit and all that, but
the
time gets close to towards the end of the group activity, I would cheat again. so yeah, there are methods that you can use that you can come across as a very polished, very confident speaker, and you don't have to memorize lots of stuff. And in the beginning, I would tell people that I would cheat regularly to make sure that I don't rob you of anything. I want to do an excellent job, and I have a checklist here. So I would, in the past, I think maybe 10 years, I don't say anything. I just have my three-ring binder with me. They don't care. As long as you teach them how to grow those juicy tomatoes, or the managers how to motivate their people better, how to reduce conflict, how to improve team performance, they don't mind if you once in a while glance at your three-ring binder. So
no, and that's the thing. I tell people, you can't stand up on stage and read your notes, but having your notes and glancing at them is fine. Like nobody minds that.
Exactly, but yeah, don't read them. So I applied to be a keynote speaker at the educational event a couple of years ago, and I did not get the gig. I was one of the breakout session speakers, and I went to the keynote address, and it was Dr. somebody. Jesus, that was the longest 15 minutes of my life. The PowerPoint was filled of ginormous paragraphs, and he was reading off the freaking PowerPoint. I mean, it hurt sitting there. Hurt. I'm like, they could have paid me a quarter what they paid him, and the crowd would have got way more value out of it. Or somebody else. It doesn't have to be me, but that was painful.
No, I don't, because when I'm doing in-person stuff, I don't use PowerPoint slides. I don't do any slides anymore. And I was talking to a guy. Yeah, I don't. I have zero slides. I use them online because people need something to look at. If I'm doing like virtual stuff, I use slides. But in person, I don't use slides anymore. And I was team presenting with somebody once, and when we were doing the prep, I was like, I don't use slides. Like, no, I don't use slides either. And so, E.G., I don't kid you. Like, I went out there and I did my thing without the slides. And he came up after me and he read his presentation off the slides. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like people think they're being interactive, but they're not. Like it's if you're not doing interactive activity. I was on a webinar the other day, but like, we want this to be interactive, and then they didn't ask any more questions. They didn't do anything. They just lectured us for an hour. And I was like, that's not interactive.
I've been through one of those maybe 3 or 4 days ago, and every 20 minutes or so, she checked in like, "Are you guys still with me?" And that's it. But it was an amazing workshop because she was talking about how to use ChatGPT to create a course, and she blew my brain away.
Oh, that's great. I mean,
interactive session that I've been in a long time, but it was very educational.
And that's the key. The key is that your content has to be there and it has to be engaging. People have to want to learn what you're teaching, and then the other stuff doesn't matter as much. That is absolutely true.
It's almost like you were reading my mind, because I was about to tell you that in the first maybe 5 years, I had my PowerPoint, I had a printout of my PowerPoint, and I had a flip chart with the same bullet points in case my PowerPoint breaks, in case somebody steals my three-ring binder. I have I was prepared. I could not. And you said something earlier about, if you screw up something, you forget something, don't apologize. You don't say it right that way, but you don't. They don't know that you screwed up. You don't know that you forgot to say something like, "Oh, I forgot that." No. You just move on. They don't know that.
Or come back around to it or whatever. But yeah, that's and it's interesting because you were talking earlier about you forgot your next thing, and so you were kind of staring at the ground. And as a presenter, it feels like that's going on for hours. But from the
Mhm.
audience's point of view, it's a second and a half. It doesn't really, it doesn't register, like gives them time to catch up with you. So it's a really interesting, like as the presenter, it feels like there's this big void of silence, but the audience does not mind.
Exactly. And in fact, I challenge everybody to practice being comfortable with silence.
Yeah.
Did you hear the silence that I just left there? Yeah. So when you talk, give them a second or two to let the information you just shared, let it anchor in, let it sink in. Because if you just keep on talking, and on the stage, that 1 second feels like 5 or 10 seconds. Yeah. But it's not. So, but yeah, about the PowerPoint. So in the first 5 years or so, I always use PowerPoint, and then slowly, I weaned myself off it, mostly out of laziness, actually.
Yep.
But for the past 5 or 10 years, I ask the organizer, I said, do you want me to use PowerPoint? And some of them, like, absolutely, we want you to use PowerPoint. So actually, some of them in the RFP, they will say that you need to have PowerPoint.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But
well, I mean, if they require PowerPoint, then
yeah, but if they don't require, I do not use PowerPoint anymore. Zero. So and it's great. I love it that way. I'm not locked into my bullet points, because sometimes I go ahead, I go yeah, and then I get to I get to the next slide. Now I have to repeat what I just said.
So early on in my career, I was doing a no-fee talk for one of the local networking groups or whatever, and I said, you have a projector? She's like, no, I don't have one, but you can rent one. You can just rent one. And I remember thinking it wasn't exactly in these words, but I was like, no way, I'm going to rent a projector for a no-fee talk. And so I went and did the talk without the projector. And I can't tell you how relaxed everyone is when I go and give a talk and say I don't have any slides, because suddenly there's no technology. Like there's nothing anyone has to worry about. And talk about anxiety. I mean, I see speakers up there on the stage, you know, instead of welcoming their audience and kind of being there, they're like anxiously hunched over their laptop trying to get the thing working. And of course you get it working, and then they introduce you, and then you come back and the projector is turned off. And so I have a 0 slide program. I really like to help people not have slides, because it just removes all that technology. It helps you connect with your audience better.
So when I do use slides, I use crazy images,
Mhm.
silly images,
Yeah.
Visually stunning images, and I will only have one statement in the middle. If I do use 2 or 3, make sure that they are not there right away. Make sure that it comes up. I mean, for me on the slide right away, there will be one of them, and then click, the next one comes up. Click, because otherwise people read ahead. You are talking about the first point, but they are reading ahead everything else. Now they cannot hear what you're saying. They don't understand what they are reading either. So that's a mistake to make sure to avoid.
Absolutely. Good tip.
So really cool stuff. I know we could talk about this for hours. Both of us are very passionate about this topic, but I have a networking event to lead in about 10 minutes. So any closing remarks you want to make, anything that you want to stress?
Yeah, I mean, you don't get better at speaking by thinking about speaking. You have to get out there and speak. And I encourage people to just go out and speak. Like that's
as Mr. Mikey said, just do it.
Just do it. Exactly.
And there are mixed messages when you mention Toastmasters. Lots of them will tell you, oh no, don't do Toastmasters, that's a waste of time. And there will be other millions who will tell you, yeah, do Toastmasters.
I know plenty of people. I've never done Toastmasters, but I know plenty of people who love Toastmasters, and it's really helpful.
And I know many people who talk against Toastmasters who's never done Toastmasters. So I've done it for about 15 years. I mean, in the beginning of my career, changed my life. Not only my speaking, but my life. I grew in confidence to levels that I've never even known that existed, because I went to lots of competitions, won competitions, humorous competitions, just regular speech competition. Then I got invited to present at Toastmasters Leadership Institute, where you speak to hundreds of people, teach them public speaking skills. And I mean, I just noticed that, wow, I walk differently. I stand differently when I enter a room. I mean, it's just crazy. So I highly recommend it.
Excellent.
And just practice as much as you can. And Toastmasters is a great way.
That's a great way of practicing. Yes.
Yeah.
Great way to get the practice.
With a small group that are there to support you. So yeah. Well, thank you again, Andrew, for accepting my invitation. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you, if they have any questions, follow-up questions?
Yep. So I'm the elevator pitch coach, Andrew Winig, on LinkedIn, and improvandy.com is my website.
improvandy.com. And make sure to connect with him on Alignable as well, and on LinkedIn. And well, thank you again, Andy. And we'll do something similar again. Maybe we'll do one on the elevator pitch. I know that's a big thing for many of us. We are all business owners here on Alignable, so that's a big one. So next time we'll perhaps talk about that.
That'd be great. Thanks, EG.
All right, take care.